What happens when a cartel boat racing across the Caribbean suddenly becomes the focus of the most sophisticated surveillance network on Earth? The answer begins with a silence so sharp it cuts through the morning sky until the roar of a US Marine Corps AH-1Z Viper tears across the horizon. At 9:58 a.m., the helicopter slices through humid air at 150 knots, descending toward a smuggling vessel that has no idea it is seconds away from becoming a geopolitical message. In an era where President Donald Trump demands visible demonstrations of American reach, this mission unfolds as more than a tactical engagement. It becomes a test of deterrence, sovereignty, and the limits of criminal impunity in 2025. And across the Caribbean basin, already destabilized by escalating Venezuelan pressures, renewed narco-mobilization, and shifting maritime alliances identified by Reuters and the BBC, every actor watches closely. Could one missile redefine the power dynamic of an entire region? The event begins with a simple radar contact, a go-fast boat departing northern Venezuela, moving north at 45 knots along the infamous Caribbean Express, a smuggling lane repeatedly flagged by regional intelligence groups and highlighted in recent DW reporting on transnational criminal networks. The vessel's thermal signature, captured by the Viper's target sight system, glows like a warning flare against the cooler sea. Twin Mercury outboards scream under strain, their uneven acoustic pattern confirmed by sonobuoys dropped by a US P-8A Poseidon, revealing poor cartel maintenance. But speed, not refinement, defines smuggling operations, and today speed is not enough. Key developments tighten around the target like a steel cage. Link 16 relays its position to the Viper in real time. The Poseidon, cruising at 20,000 feet, overlays radar tracks with acoustic metadata. U.S. Naval Command aboard the USS Wuma forwards intelligence intercepts suggesting this shipment may be tied to an expanded trafficking pipeline operating from Venezuelan ports, an escalation that Defense News and Jane's recently linked to increased militia cooperation with criminal syndicates. With each update, the tactical picture sharpens range closure, rate wind vectors, and estimated time before the vessel reaches international boundaries. Yet the Viper closes in faster. The pilot's helmet-mounted display marks a single point on an empty ocean, and that point becomes the focal node of a much larger confrontation, one between state power and non-state defiance. Strategic analysis shows why this operation matters far beyond one destroyed boat. According to The Guardian and Al Jazeera, 2025 has seen an unprecedented convergence of political instability in South America, maritime smuggling, and the militarization of criminal economies. Washington now views these operations not only as law enforcement actions, but as strategic deterrence mission signals to hostile states that the US will not permit proxy networks to threaten regional stability. Trump's administration frames these rapid response strikes as essential to preserving American maritime dominance, especially as Chinese naval activity expands across the Atlantic trade corridor. A single Viper chase becomes a microcosm of a broader question: who controls the waterways that fuel global markets? But the human impact often hides beneath the noise of engines and missiles. On the cartel boat, young recruits, many coerced or economically cornered, face a fate they were never trained to comprehend. On the Viper, Marines carry the weight of knowing that their actions shape diplomatic ripples stretching from Caracas to Washington. Coastal communities across Central America, already strained by inflation and shifting migration routes, reported by Reuters, feel the consequences of each disrupted smuggling chain. Every decision in this unfolding chase represents the collision of personal survival, national strategy, and global security. As the Viper descends toward weapons range and the sky tightens into a crosshair around the fleeing vessel, one question lingers over the Caribbean, like a gathering storm in a world balancing security and freedom. How far must American power extend to keep the seas safe, and who ultimately decides the price of that protection? A viewer keen on the world's shifting power map may want to stay with this story, because what follows will test the limits of modern deterrence. The chase tightens long before the cartel boat ever realizes it has been marked for elimination. High above the Caribbean, a US Navy P-8A Poseidon sweeps the ocean with radar so sensitive it can distinguish between a fishing skiff, a smuggling craft, and a drifting log. But on this morning, the signature is unmistakable: twin outboards, high-speed northbound from Venezuela, a textbook profile of the Caribbean Express. What begins as a flicker on a screen quickly transforms into a real-time multi-platform pursuit, raising a broader question echoed recently by analysts at Reuters and BBC: how long can criminal networks operate in a battle space increasingly shaped by military-grade tracking systems? This event unfolds with scientific precision. The Poseidon's ANAPY-10 radar paints a coherent track despite sea clutter and tropical humidity. Aircrew operators deploy passive sonobuoys not because they need to, but because intelligence doctrine under President Donald Trump emphasizes overconfirmation. Two Mercury 300 horsepower engines hum out of sync, a sound pattern that Jane's Defense Weekly notes has become increasingly common among smuggling vessels forced to run engines far beyond safe tolerances. The Poseidon collects infrared, acoustic, and radar signatures, simultaneously building a digital fingerprint that ensures the vessel cannot simply vanish into wave shadows. Key developments expand across the sky like an invisible net. Link 16, the US military's high-speed data backbone, threads together the Poseidon, the Viper, the USS Wuma, and regional command centers. Every bearing change, every speed fluctuation, even the micro-oscillations of the boat's hull and choppy current are mapped in real time. DW recently highlighted how this multi-layered integration airborne radar, electromagnetic intelligence surface sensors has reshaped maritime security across NATO's operational theaters. Today, that doctrine extends into the Caribbean, where American forces increasingly treat cartel vessels like hostile, fast-moving nodes in a decentralized threat ecosystem. Strategic analysis underscores why Trump's administration amplifies these operations. According to Al Jazeera's 2025 reporting, Venezuela's deteriorating economy has driven a surge in militia-backed trafficking networks seeking revenue far beyond state control. The Guardian notes that Caracas has quietly tolerated and in some cases facilitated smuggling departures to maintain political loyalty among armed groups. For Washington, the implications are clear. If these networks operate with impunity, they create corridors that rival state-controlled maritime lanes. And in a geopolitical climate shaped by rising Chinese naval influence and tense US-Latin American diplomacy, projecting rapid credible force becomes essential to preserving regional security. The human impact stretches beyond the boat being hunted. Caribbean fishermen fear accidental intercepts as smuggling vessels increasingly hide among legitimate maritime traffic, a phenomenon reported by Reuters through interviews with coastal communities in Trinidad, Aruba, and Colombia. Civilian cargo operators adapt by using AIS transponders more aggressively to avoid being mistaken for illicit craft. Even US Navy crews feel the pressure, as Defense News notes constant deployments in contested maritime zones have pushed readiness cycles to the limit. In the chase, now unfolding, every crew member from Poseidon operators to Navy watchstanders carries the weight of knowing one misread signal could shift the tactical equation. As the distributed tracking network tightens its grip and the Viper closes with lethal intent, a profound question emerges: can modern surveillance systems eliminate criminal operations faster than those networks evolve new methods of evasion? Or is this accelerating cycle shaping a future where every stretch of ocean becomes a battlefield for influence? The answer begins to form in the next moments where technology meets force on the open sea. The ocean below looks calm, but inside the Viper's cockpit, the atmosphere tightens into a controlled storm. The pilot's helmet-mounted display lights up with targeting symbology, range markers, and laser cue indicators, each one a reminder that the gap between peace and destruction is now measured in seconds. From 2,000 feet, the Cartel boat appears small, a sliver of white noise against the restless Caribbean. But the US military does not measure threats by size. In 2025, under President Donald Trump's renewed emphasis on overwhelming force projection, even a fiberglass speedboat can represent a strategic challenge if left unchecked. And so the weapons preparation begins quiet, methodical, and terrifyingly precise. The event unfolds deep inside the Viper's neural center, the target sight system. This sensor suite, described by Defense News as one of the most advanced optical platforms ever mounted on a helicopter, aligns perfectly with the pilot's gaze. Wherever the helmet points, a stabilized FLIR turret follows, locking onto heat signatures, identifying surface anomalies, and tracking micro movements through haze and ocean spray. A faint sparkle of reflected laser energy dances across the hull of the Cartel boat, invisible to the human eye, but screamingly bright to the TSS. The system predicts the smuggler's evasive path with algorithms that Jane's compares to mathematical predation, continuously forecasting movement patterns faster than any human could adapt. Key developments accelerate. The pilot sets the pulse repetition frequency 1113, assigning the Hellfire missile its specific signature to follow. In modern US doctrine, each missile is paired to one laser handshake, reducing the risk of cross-target contamination, something highlighted in a recent BBC analysis on precision weapons. The Romeo variant Hellfire selected for this strike cools its seeker head to nearly 200°C, sharpening its detection capability. Fuse settings shift to instantaneous detonation. Attack profile direct strike. Mode lock on before launch. Every confirmation deepens the missile's lethal intent. Meanwhile, the Viper's 20mm M197 cannon stands ready as a secondary option, less elegant, more visceral, capable of ripping the boat apart even without guided systems. Strategic analysis shows how this moment mirrors America's broader geopolitical calculus. Reuters reporting throughout 2025 highlights Washington's increased reliance on precision strikes to counter non-state actors operating with state-level support. Venezuela's growing entanglement with militia-backed trafficking networks detailed by The Guardian has forced the US to adopt preemptive interdiction tactics. Each operation serves two audiences: the criminals, who must understand the cost of defiance, and rival states watching to gauge whether American resolve is weakening. In Trump's foreign policy posture, hesitation equals vulnerability, and vulnerability in maritime corridors could reshape trade migration patterns and regional military alliances. Yet beneath the tactical complexity lies a human cost. The men on the fleeing boat, often young and expendable, inhabit a reality shaped by economic collapse and coercion. Al Jazeera's field reporting across South America describes recruitment pipelines where teenagers join smuggling rings not out of loyalty but survival. On the opposite end, US Marines in the Viper carry a different burden: the moral weight of precision warfare. Every laser lock, every configuration setting, every trigger press requires balancing operational necessity with an acute awareness of what destruction truly means. Duty and consequence merge in the space between crosshairs. As systems reach their final readiness state and the Viper steadies into firing position, one question hangs in the tension-filled cockpit in an age where advanced technology grants unparalleled control over life and death. How much responsibility must nations bear for the conflicts they choose to resolve through force, and where does accountability truly begin? The answer approaches with the missile that is about to leave the rail. The sky holds its breath, the sea below churns with restless motion, and then in a single violent flash of acceleration, a Hellfire missile erupts from the Viper's wing like a thunderbolt engineered for precision. For the Cartel boat racing toward international waters, the launch marks the moment when escape transforms into impossibility. The missile's rocket motor ignites with a force so intense it compresses the air around it, accelerating from 0 to Mach 1.3 in under 3 seconds. In an era where President Donald Trump calls for immediate, overwhelming responses to transnational threats, this airborne strike embodies the administration's doctrine: decisive, fast, unmistakable. The Caribbean becomes a stage where American power speaks without ambiguity. The event begins with the missile's internal awakening. As the launch rail drops away, the Hellfire's ring laser gyroscope spins at 40,000 RPM, stabilizing its orientation. The seeker cooled to nearly 200°C by compressed argon locks onto the incoming laser reflection coded to 1113, the Viper's unique targeting signature. Simultaneously, the onboard computer calculates real-time intercept geometry bearing to target closing speed, angular displacement, and course correction rates. According to Jane's Defense Weekly, the missile performs these calculations 50 times per second, effectively predicting where the boat will be rather than where it is. The Romeo variant's control fins pivot with microsecond precision, slicing through turbulence as the missile punches through the transonic region. Key developments unfold as the Hellfire climbs to gain energy, then rolls into a 35-degree dive toward the waterline. The missile's warhead arms via the FMU-139 intelligent fuse, selecting instantaneous detonation to maximize hull fragmentation, a detail noted by Defense News in its coverage of US counter-narcotics strike profiles. Laser energy reflected from the boat's fiberglass hull widens from a glowing point into a clear geometric shape. The autopilot adjusts for wave motion thermal distortion and the boat's desperate zigzag evasions. But nothing the smugglers attempt changes the physics working against them. Every 20 milliseconds, proportional navigation recalculates their fate. Strategic analysis highlights the symbolism behind this moment. Reuters and BBC reporting throughout 2025 emphasize Washington's increasing reliance on precision munitions to enforce maritime order in unstable regions. Venezuelan-backed trafficking routes, which The Guardian notes have expanded in both scale and sophistication, represent a challenge not just to US law enforcement, but to regional geopolitical stability. Each targeted strike signals to hostile actors that the United States under Trump's assertive defense posture retains unmatched reach. This is not merely a missile intercepting a boat, it is a diplomatic message delivered at the speed of sound. Human impact, however, offers a stark counterweight on the cartel vessel. The men many coerced into smuggling by collapsing economic conditions reported by Al Jazeera now confront the terror of modern warfare without warning or defense. They operate in a world where survival often means choosing the least deadly option available. Meanwhile, US personnel involved in the strike Marines, sensor operators, naval commanders carry the burden of knowing their decisions ripple far beyond the battlefield. Precision warfare may reduce collateral casualties, but it does not eliminate the emotional or ethical weight borne by those who execute lethal orders. As the Hellfire closes the final meters, its seeker fixes the hull in perfect clarity, velocity, increasing margin for error decreasing. In these final instants, one question pierces the air as sharply as the missile itself. In a world increasingly shaped by targeted strikes and rapid response warfare, can deterrence through force truly create stability? Or does every precision attack sow the seeds of tomorrow's conflict? The missile is about to answer in its own devastating language. The final seconds arrive with the terrifying clarity of inevitability. The Hellfire missile descends through humid Caribbean air, its guidance fins locking into place as though the laws of physics themselves are conspiring toward a single violent conclusion. Below, the fleeing cartel boat carves frantic zigzagging lines across the water, sharp turns, throttle bursts, desperate maneuvers. But nothing can outrun a weapon calculating intercepts 50 times per second. Infrared sensors saturate with heat bloom. Laser reflections widen into a shimmering outline. The missile no longer sees a vessel, it sees a solution. And in this moment, as President Donald Trump's administration highlights decisive action against transnational networks, the forces of technology, strategy, and geopolitics converge into a single white-hot point of impact. The event unfolds with mechanical ruthlessness. The missile's seeker captures its final lock, ignoring wave glints, turbulence, and solar distortion, all filtered out by algorithms refined through years of counterinsurgency and maritime interdiction. The FMU-139 fuse, now fully armed, awaits hull deformation measured in milliseconds. At 995 miles per hour, the Hellfire strikes the boat at the waterline. The crushing force triggers immediate detonation. A 20-pound multi-purpose warhead unleashes the explosive equivalent of 28 pounds of TNT. A white flash blinds the Viper's TSS feed for an entire second, an eternity in infrared terms. When the sensors recover, the sea is transformed. A 100-meter debris circle forms where the boat once raced north, fragments raining into the ocean like metallic rain. Nothing larger than a beach ball remains afloat. Key developments confirm complete annihilation. Engine fragments sink rapidly. Heat signatures dissipate. No secondary explosions indicate hidden munitions or additional fuel stores. The Viper performs one final orbit standard protocol reinforced by Defense News documentation of US strike verification procedures. With confirmation transmitted back to the USS Wuma, the strike is officially logged as a good effect on target, the highest level classification for maritime interdiction missions. Meanwhile, P-8 operators capture electro-optical and infrared imagery for intelligence analysis, providing a forensic record used to identify trafficking routes and cartel operational patterns. Reuters previously reported an uptick in such intelligence sharing between US agencies and Caribbean nations seeking to disrupt criminal maritime corridors. Strategic analysis reveals the broader meaning hidden beneath the explosion. This single strike sends shockwaves through the regional security environment. As BBC coverage of 2025's shifting naval dynamics shows, cartel operations increasingly intersect with political instability in Venezuela and growing Chinese logistical footholds in Latin America. The United States, under Trump's leadership, leverages precision strikes not merely to destroy targets, but to reassert dominance over key maritime routes. These operations act as deterrent signals that the Caribbean remains under American watch, and that any vessel tied to hostile networks risks immediate destruction. The Guardian notes heightened concerns among regional governments that smuggling networks may become pawns in larger geopolitical contests, raising tensions across an already fragile coastline. Yet the human impact ripples in more complex ways. The men aboard the destroyed boat, many young, underpaid, and trapped within the criminal economy, meet instantaneous death. Their families, often living in neglected coastal towns, suffering from inflation and food shortages, absorb the consequences in silence. Al Jazeera's field reports from Venezuelan communities reveal how economic desperation fuels recruitment pipelines, ensuring replacements for every lost crew. On the US side, the Marines and sailors involved will carry the psychological imprint of the strike reminders that modern precision warfare still ends human lives even when conducted with surgical accuracy. Balancing national security with moral responsibility remains an unresolved burden felt most deeply by those who serve. As the smoke dissipates and ocean currents swallow the last fragments of the wreckage, a final question reverberates across the Caribbean theater. Can the destruction of individual smuggling vessels truly interrupt a vast evolving criminal ecosystem? Or must the United States confront a deeper crisis shaping the region's future? The Viper turns toward home, but the implications of this strike are only beginning to unfold. The sea returns to silence. The white flash fades. The smoke dissolves into the humid Caribbean air. In the wake of the Hellfire strike, the AH-1Z Viper circles once slow, deliberate, clinical. Nothing remains of the Cartel boat but drifting debris and a widening patch of churned water. The pilot transmits confirmation to the USS Wuma, and the operation enters the official record. Yet what looks like a simple ticked box in a mission logbook becomes in 2025 a symbol of something far larger: America's determination under President Donald Trump to demonstrate unambiguous dominance wherever lawlessness endangers U.S. strategic interests. And as the Viper banks northward, the question emerges with a clarity as sharp as the missile that ended the chase. What message has just been sent to the world? The event's immediate aftermath unfolds across multiple layers of the U.S. security architecture. On the Wuma's Combat Information Center, screens infrared replay confirms total destruction of the vessel. Analysts catalog debris patterns, engine fragments, and heat signatures, data later shared with interagency partners and mapped against smuggling networks identified by Reuters and BBC investigations into Venezuelan-linked trafficking flows. The P-8 Poseidon relays high-resolution imagery to Southern Command for intelligence triage. Maritime patrol assets adjust search grids looking for potential secondary vessels or recovery operations. Every step reflects what DW recently described as America's integrated kill web, a doctrine that turns individual platforms into interconnected nodes capable of eliminating threats within minutes. Key developments ripple outward. Regional governments already wary of Venezuela's worsening instability receive immediate diplomatic briefings. According to The Guardian's 2025 reporting, South American states have grown increasingly concerned that cartel routes now intersect with proxy militias, political factions, and foreign naval actors, including Chinese logistical networks expanding through Atlantic ports. Washington's precision strike is interpreted through this lens: part interdiction, part geopolitical declaration. Even Al Jazeera notes that U.S. rapid response operations have become more frequent and more public in the past year, signaling a shift toward deterrence by demonstration. And within hours, cartel communication channels reportedly go dark, a shakeup reminiscent of patterns described by Janes after previous U.S. interdictions disrupted regional trafficking chains. Strategic analysis highlights why this singular explosion matters profoundly. The Caribbean basin has become a pressure point in global power competition. Venezuela's fractured governance has fueled criminal corridors. China's expanding economic influence has introduced new strategic ambiguity. Meanwhile, transnational crime syndicates thrive in the gaps between political instability and maritime chaos. The United States must project force not merely to intercept drugs, but to maintain freedom of navigation, assure allies, and reinforce its global prestige. Trump's administration frames these actions as restoring American deterrence, a theme echoed in defense news coverage of U.S. naval modernization programs. Destroying a single boat therefore becomes a message encrypted in fire: the Caribbean is not open territory. The human impact, however, defies easy categorization. The men aboard the destroyed vessel, likely a mix of seasoned smugglers and desperate youths, are erased in seconds. Their families, already strained by Venezuela's economic collapse, face the consequences without explanation or recourse. Communities across Colombia, Trinidad, and Aruba, interviewed by Reuters, describe an escalating cycle. Every interdiction disrupts supply chains temporarily, but poverty ensures new recruits fill the void. On the American side, Marines and Navy personnel return from missions with the weight of precision warfare etched onto their memory. The Viper pilot executes his duties flawlessly, yet the psychological residue of lethal action never disappears entirely. Security and humanity collide in every strike. As the USS Wuma resumes patrol and the Viper disappears into the horizon, one final question lingers like heat rising off the water can. Overwhelming force truly stabilize a region where criminal networks grow faster than governments can contain them? Or will each tactical victory simply push the conflict into deeper, more dangerous waters? For viewers following the shifting landscape of global power, the answer to that question will define the next chapter of the Caribbean struggle. Stay engaged, stay informed, and consider subscribing for the next unfolding story. A U.S. Marine Corps AH-1Z Viper launches from the USS Wuma to intercept a Venezuelan cartel boat racing north across the Caribbean, with President Donald Trump emphasizing assertive maritime dominance in 2025. The operation becomes both a tactical interdiction and a strategic message. A P-8A Poseidon identifies the vessel using radar and acoustic data feeding real-time coordinates through Link 16. As the Viper closes in, the pilot configures the TSS laser codes and Hellfire missile systems with surgical precision. When the Romeo variant Hellfire launches, it calculates intercept geometry at blistering speed, adjusting course through turbulence until it strikes the hull at nearly 1,000 times. The explosion obliterates the boat instantly. The strike's wider implications echo through regional politics. Venezuelan instability, cartel networks, and rising Chinese maritime influence all shape the confrontation. Reuters, BBC, DW, Defense News, Janes, and Al Jazeera highlight growing concerns over criminal state convergence across South America. While the mission strengthens U.S. deterrence, it also raises human and ethical questions. Destroyed traffickers leave behind grieving families, and disrupted communities while U.S. personnel bear the emotional burden of precision warfare. The Caribbean remains contested, and future conflicts may escalate.